Welcome to Wild Heart Revival, a gathering place for heartfelt conversations and stories as pathways of renewal and revival. I'm your host, Tay Tayari, and today's guest is Rosemerry Trommer. What does it mean to be a poet in these times? Times of horror and wonder, beauty and despair. For Rosemerry, poetry is both a bridge and a practice. It bridges the inner and outer worlds, helps us stay fully present to what is, lets the world shape us, and offers something honest, authentic, and beautiful in return. It is an apprenticeship to mystery and an opportunity to cultivate a life of presence and praise. In this conversation, Rosemerry shares poems written with profound depth of heart. Verses that respond to sorrow with beauty and honor the natural glimmers of grace that surround us each day. As she reminds us, one way to deal with the ache of the world is with beauty. We explore poetry as a radical form of responsivity, how it expands the self, supports our process of truing, and allows us to be guided by wonder. Poetry becomes a passageway into living more fully, an opening to the immensity of life, and a way of moving through the world as if every moment is an invitation to say, Hallelujah anyway. Rosemerry Trommer lives in Placerville, Colorado, on the banks of the wild San Miguel River. She's served as San Miguel County's first poet laureate and as Western Slope Poet Laureate, and was a finalist for Colorado Poet Laureate in 2019. A devoted guide in creative practice, she co-hosts the podcast Emerging Form and co-leads Soul Writers Circle. She teaches and performs poetry for retreats, educators, scientists, addiction recovery programs, and hospice. She's also a storyteller, performing at venues from the Wheeler Opera House in Aspen to the National Storytelling Festival, and she gave an incredible TEDx talk on the power of metaphor. Writing a poem a day since 2006, she has published 13 collections, and her work has appeared in O Magazine, PBS NewsHour, and American Life and Poetry. Her most recent collection, of which she shares from in our conversation, is titled The Unfolding, and it explores living, quote, in the key of grief, but the melody is praise. And in 2023, she released All the Honey, and she also has an amazing spoken word album titled Dark Praise, which she created with Steve Law. Her work has won numerous awards, which I think will become very obvious and evident to you, dear listener, upon hearing her poetry today. If you are new to the show, welcome. I'm a threshold counselor with an online practice devoted to supporting wanderers, wanderers, and edge walkers. I offer individual, couples, and group counsel, as well as guidance around death and dying. I'm currently refreshing how my work is presented on my website, so the clearest way to learn more is to set up a free insight call, a risk-free space to connect, explore our alignment, and see if we're a good fit to walk together through a pivotal chapter of your life. And if you haven't already, I also want to warmly invite you to subscribe to Wild Heart Revival on your favorite podcast platform and to join us on YouTube for the visual side of the project. Your presence, ratings, shares, and thoughtful comments truly nurture this humble offering's ongoing organic growth. Thank you for being here. Now, let's live the poems and praise Hallelujah anyway with our dear guest for today, Rosemerry Trommer. We begin with me reading Rosemary's poem titled Today's Sermon. Today's sermon was a single drop of melted snow that clung to the tip of a tight red bud at the end of a naked branch. It didn't have to shout or sing to make me fall in love with the way afternoon light gathered inside it. Such a simple pulpit, such humble gospel, this radiant preacher, this silence in which the prayer is made of listening. And so that is the prayer that I'm carrying into this conversation, is that kind of listening. And um, I, as I was mentioning before as well, I was wondering, what does it mean to be a poet in these times? It's always in these times because we're alive now.
Right.
And so, of course, listening is such a essential aspect of that. But I just want to maybe offer that question here at the beginning. What does it mean to be a poet in these times to you? It's a huge question. So just whatever's emergent now today.
Okay. I love that question. I want to start backing up just a second. Thank you for reading that poem to me. And I wanted to say that it began uh, when I read another person's poem, which began, "Today the sermon is." And I
Mm,
thought, isn't that just the perfect title? Just any moment we could begin a new poem with that. Today the sermon is, and just let it be anything that we see in the
mm,
moment. Today the sermon is the internet not working, right? Today the sermon is the field, uh, you know, turning brown,
mm,
because of drought. Today the sermon is there. I mean, and just you could say anything. There isn't a single thing that you could follow that with and not find some sweet little nugget for you to move forward with.
mhm,
So so at least part of what it means to be a poet right now is to know that we are surrounded by poems, that we live poems, that we are a poem living,
mm,
that there is nothing that could not offer itself to us as an invitation to wonder what's here. And I think that's my greatest thrill, Tay. It's the reason that I write poems every day, is because as a practice, what that does is it invites me to notice what's here inside,
mm,
what's happening outside. And the poem is the bridge between these two worlds, which I didn't understand when I began writing poetry.
right.
I was trying to write something good on a piece of paper that other people would like, or that it would get published or whatever. And now what's so clear to me is that the reason to write poems, the reason to be a poet for Rosemerry Trommer today, is because it becomes an invitation to be very, very present and to open to everything that is, not just the things that I want, but to it all. And the thrill of it, I suppose, is that in that open space, even the things that we want to say no to have a place, that there's a relief in not resisting them. There's a relief in turning toward the thing that we'd most rather turn away from and wondering, to use the language, what do you have to teach me? What is the sermon today?
Mm, mhm,
And if you have a negative association with the word sermon, I mean, you could what the Dharma talk today, the wisdom today, you could fill that in with anything else you wanted to fill that in with. But it's, I think the role of the poet is to do that work ourselves, right? To do that work of bringing the world in, opening to the world, bringing it in, and letting it do its work on us, and returning it to the world as honestly as possible, with as much authenticity as possible.
Mm. Mhm. Yeah, so beautifully said. Yeah, I am. When I was also contemplating what does it mean to be a poet today, kind of immediately went to just the struggle and strife and just blatant suffering that so many humans and non-human beings are experiencing today, right now, in this moment. And that there's this kind of fierceness and courage that the poet has to maintain that kind of opening to life and to meet it for what it is and to be willing to listen so deeply and honestly so as to be changed and moved and to then craft beauty from it. And not beauty as an ideal, but just beauty as like a natural movement. I'm reminded of Patrick Rothfuss. He says, "Perhaps it is beauty to move according to your nature." And I'm wondering about that, that is this openness to the pain that's so obvious, that is so deeply felt,
Mhm.
especially by someone sensitive like an artist, a poet. Um, this is beauty the natural outpouring of that? I don't even know what I'm trying to say, but is beauty kind of the natural outpouring of being open to the immensity of life?
Right. So I'm thinking now about beauty. I'm thinking about how what is the work of the poet now? The truth is that was the work of the poet forever, right?
Mm,
Not just now, but always. And I'm thinking of some of my heroes, Anna Akhmatova, who was writing in Russia during the war. I'm thinking of Yehuda Amichai, an Israeli poet who wrote so much about just trauma. I'm thinking of Pablo Neruda in
mm,
Chile, and just I think that there is an invitation for us to do it all, I suppose, also in our own way. Do you face it directly and go straight to the heart of it, or do you circle it like Emily Dickinson would say, "My business is circumference," and you come at it. There's so many ways to do it right. So that's going to be up to the individual poet, right?
right.
But then how do the all three of those poets that I named, and I'm sure we could name hundreds more, wrote such astonishingly beautiful poetry out of such ache, such pain, such injustice, such horror. And how does that happen, right? How is it that we turn to beauty? And is that just it's not just the work of poetry, right? That's the work of art. That's the work of music. And I'm thinking actually, I'd love to share a poem that I wrote last night,
Please.
actually
Oh, yeah.
about about beauty in a time of horror. And it was
Okay.
I had just because you brought it up. I had gone to a house concert. Uh, it was a piano, well, there was a piano player and there was a quartet and a few other musicians also, but they
Mm,
ended up playing one of Schumann's piano quintets.
mhm.
And so I wrote this love letter back in time to Robert Schumann
Oh,
about beauty and horror. And it's called a Letter Sent Back in Time to Schumann. I wish you could have heard it, Robert. Your piano quintet in E flat major played tonight in a home in the San Juan Mountains. I know you heard it many times, heck played by Clara and Mendelssohn, but I think you would have loved it tonight. The way the cello resonated through the old wood floor and into the soles of my feet. The way my husband smiled through the whole scherzo. The way birdsong filled the silences between each movement, the way the whole evening was cradled by the scent of evergreens and the low pink glow of the sun. It was exuberant, Robert, the kind of ecstatic beauty so desperately needed now when humans turn against each other so quickly. We need something splendid, full of vigor and freshness, just as much as you must have back in 1842. I wish you could have seen it, the way the audience rose to our feet, thrilled by the music, the musicians, the night. I wish you could have heard it. The applause, the ovation. I wish you could read this letter while you're in the sanatorium, wondering what it was all for. What do any of us know of sanity? You wouldn't believe what the world is like now, but I know, Robert, one way to deal with the ache of the world is with beauty. And friend, it's still happening. The craziness and the drive to find hope in music. It's still happening. Your music in rooms, small and grand. It's still happening. The agony, the love.
Mm.
Yes, I think when we're desperate, beauty, although I would suggest it's always essential, is maybe even more so. Just some thread to hold on to, or not to hold on to. So, some thread that weaves through us that we know we don't get to hold on to. But when it meets us, it it never ceases to amaze me, Tay, how it just takes the smallest amount of beauty to somehow in that moment counterbalance an insane amount of grief or horror or desperation.
Mhm.
You can hardly imagine that one butterfly could stand up to a war, that one opening peony could stand up to the loss of a child. And yet in that moment when we're met with that beauty, it doesn't turn away from the horror, but it at that moment it's all present, and it I don't want to say it balances it out. No, but it reminds us what it is to be alive also. This too. This too is what it is to be alive.
Yeah. Yeah, this too. Yeah, I've worked with, and experienced this in my own life, and I've worked with a few individuals that have, reached a point of feeling totally disenchanted by life and feeling, um, even like they would want life to end. And I know that this is near and dear to your own life and your experience with your son. This kind of depressed, almost nihilism that can take hold of us when we're faced with the immensity of life, and and it's it's that reminder that has been so helpful for me and for some folks that I've been honored to be with in these troubled moments. The reminder of when a beautiful moment does happen, like what is that? What is the essence? What is the seed there that's being tickled into, emerging from that dark space for even a moment? Like what is that force? And why does it feel so worth it? You
Yeah.
know, I I've it makes it's like it can wash it's like the power of like the tide to just like wash away, you know, all the sand castles that were built out of haste and rushing and duty and these kinds of things. that cause our suffering day in and day out, that just a moment of beauty can do that. It's really miraculous, and it's worth, I think, contemplating more deeply. And so, the poet does that in their own unique way. So fascinating.
Right. I mean, I think there it is, how in a moment where we'd rather, and I think that sometimes when and I don't want to speak for anyone else. I know that for me, when I have been in those moments of mm, despair,
Mm,
such despair, uh, I know it doesn't do any good. It doesn't do any good to say, "Oh, but look what's beautiful." Like
mhm,
that will
mhm,
never work, right? That doesn't happen. That has maybe the opposite effect. It like sends me deeper into like, "Oh, don't tell me what to do. I don't want to see the peony right now." So somehow it has to have this a more organic
yes. It has to be
inspiration.
experienced.
It
It has
has to
to be
be
experienced.
experienced. It
Yeah.
has to be, and I also know for myself that unless I am open to really feeling the despair, I will not be available to feel the joy.
Yeah.
And I know, I really, really know that. Full body, I know that. Um,
Yeah.
that doesn't, and then how is it, Tay, when I'm still sometimes surprised?
Mhm,
When when I'd rather run from something, right?
mhm.
And I and I feel it in my whole body, like, I just wanna run away from this, I just wanna hide, I just don't wanna deal with this, I just wanna go home, I just wanna do I just wanna whatever it is, I'm just and then I think partly the embodiment of it, right? It helps now to notice that, oh, that's what that's like in the body.
Yeah.
Oh, note to self, this is the moment to turn toward the thing that I most want to turn away from
Mhm.
and create as much space as possible around me so that it isn't everything. To just, I don't know else to say this, to widen the lens. Maybe this is another one of the great gifts I think of poetry, is that in poetry there are so many ways to enter a poem and to bring perspective to a poem, and that how we frame any situation makes such an enormous difference. So that literally I think of widening a lens, where this thing that I most want to turn away from, if I can turn toward it, but not just it, but open it all up, this allows uh, for a spaciousness in me then that is capable of beauty also. And
Mhm.
that's the thing that's most troublesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's an
That's yeah.
inclusivity. It's an inclusivity.
Yeah. Absolutely. So you're reminding me of this word I learned recently. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but it seems like it's pronounced okialism. Okialism. And
You
it
spell that?
basically,
Do you know how to spell that?
yeah, Ochialism. I think I
Uh-huh.
got that right. Anyway,
I
you'll find it. It's close enough. You'll find it. But the idea is, or what it means, I guess, in my own words right now, as I'm trying to remember, is the the realization of the smallness of one's perspective.
yeah,
It's like and I think that that can happen in a moment, right? Through
yeah,
like a moment of awe, or as we were talking about, those moments of beauty that come and just like wash away everything else and cast you into eternity. But I think it can also be a practice,
yeah,
right? And this is what you're speaking to, this intentional widening of the lens, this commitment and devotion to staying with the tension of despair and joy, to
yeah,
stay in that tense middle. And I
yeah,
think that that's how beauty emerges as a way of being, which could just be called art, the art of life. and however that manifests through you as your particular being. And for you, it manifests at least as incredible poetry, and I'm sure many other things. Um, so yeah, I wanted to introduce you to that word.
I
And
love that word.
yeah,
Smallness of one's perspective. I'm teaching a class soon about framing, and that will be part of it, I'm sure.
nice, nice. So you start your poetry book with this poem by Rilke. And like I was mentioning again before we got on the recording, when I was contemplating what does it mean to be a poet, and I just opened your book to that initial poem, I thought, oh, yes, of course, Rilke. Just so much respect for that being and the incredible medicine that came through. And so I I wonder if you want to read that poem just
Sure,
as
well,
to invite us into this frame, this widening of the lens, that which reminds me of, I heard one time, it's just this kind of like mantra, and that this person was inviting the listeners to um, contemplate carrying forward into their days. And it was this: hallelujah anyway,
yeah.
hallelujah anyway. And that's what I thought of initially when I read that Rilke poem, and I think it's so connected to what we're talking about. So I'd love to hear it if you're willing.
I would love to read it. And a few things to say about this poem and how it came to be in the beginning of the book. First of all, I'll just share the book there. It's called The Unfolding. And you'll notice it's pink. Pink was my son's favorite color.
Okay.
And
Um,
Finn, my son, chose to take his life, as you were alluding to earlier in our conversation, almost 4 years ago now, just before his 17th birthday.
mm,
So the poems in this book are all written since then,
mm,
also after the death of my father. So in the introduction, I say that the book, even so it's maybe written in the key of grief, but the melody is praise. I didn't know that myself until the editor said to me, well, he didn't like the structure that I had chosen,
mm.
which, well, I don't need to tell you about it, although it's still there. It's hiding inside the book. But
Nice.
he he said, these Rosemary, these are praise poems. I wonder if there's something there for you. And I, gosh, hey, I was like, how did he know that? Like, he told me something I didn't know about my own poems, but it's so obvious. They
Mm,
are they are all praise poems, even the most desperate of poems in this book, even the ones in my most desperate moments
mm,
are full of awe and
mhm,
a
mm,
longing to open.
mhm.
So when I well, and then just one more thing, then the book is actually created then around 4 words for praise that I made up, because the
Oh, I was wondering, you
yes,
made them up. Oh,
because the words that we have for praise in English anyway are really quite substandard. You know,
yeah.
like consider commend and extol and laud. These all felt kind of formal and military. And I
Yeah.
thought, what else is available to us? So I created my own language for praise. And well, I shouldn't say my own language. I created 4 new words, neologisms,
Mhm,
including verulia, which is the Latin veritas, plus alleluia, which is in my mind something like the
mhm,
praise that happens when we meet the world as it is, not the way we wish it would be, and can praise it all. Or sarom, from sorrow, plus om, which is the praise that rises out of sorrow. And only then there's a specific kind of praise, and maybe I'm guessing everyone knows it, where when your heart is deeply broken, then and only then are you capable of this other kind of um, praise that rises out of those moments
mhm, mhm,
where the loss itself isn't beautiful, but everything, there's so much beauty that comes from it.
mhm,
So I did ask Mark, who is a phenomenal, Marcus Burrows is my editor, and he is a profoundly beautiful and talented translator of Rilke's work. And so I asked him if I could use this translation of his,
Mm.
and here it is. "Oh, say, poet, what is it that you do? I praise. But what of the deadly and monstrous? How do you endure all this? How do you take it in? I praise. But the nameless, the anonymous, how, despite it all, do you keep calling to them, poet? I praise. Where does it come from? Your claim to be true in every guise and in each mask. I praise. And that the stillness and turbulence know you like star and storm, because I praise.
Mhm. Mm.
And my goodness, I mean, Rilke, he did. I mean, he, in his lifetime, out of despair, out of his own sense of horror, what was happening in the world, what was happening in his personal life, what had happened in his childhood, he created such astonishing beauty and such praise for the world.
Mhm.
My The poem that changed my life when I learned it, years ago, "You darkness that I come from, I love you." I remember how stunned I was by that poem when I first read it. "You darkness that I come from, I love you." Oh my
Right.
god, I couldn't believe that. Really? I couldn't imagine loving the dark. Now, since then, now I have an album called Dark Praise,
Yeah.
all about falling in love with the dark. I mean, it's now I'm deeply in love with the dark, but I think that, and that's another way poetry works, right? It takes the unthinkable and opens us up.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, so that's another thing I was thinking about is that one of the essential, um, function feels like not the right word, but I think you get what I mean. One of the essential impacts that poetry can have, that does have often, is the capacity to, stretch you beyond your perceived sense of self, to, expand your, awareness into a greater sense of who you are and how you relate with life, the world, the myriad others.
That's what thrills me probably more than anything else, right? Each time I meet a blank page,
Yeah.
there's the invitation to go beyond what I think I knew.
Mm.
And if I think, this is one of the promises I make myself every time I sit down to write, right? If I know the ending, write past it. And I think again and again, Tay, about how do I serve the poem? And I feel like what I mean by that is, how do I let the poem know more than I do? Which is to say, how do I get Rosemary, ego Rosemary, get enough out of the way that whatever is greater, whatever it is that's most alive in us, that lives through us, that has the chance to come through.
Mm.
And this is this not knowing, right? This is why I'm so in love with not knowing. It went from being something I was terrified of to something that I thrill in, when I can enter into that uncertain, unknowing space, that space of pure potential and mystery. Then when I'm writing a poem, every single time a chance for epiphany.
Mm.
Every single time a chance to know beyond what I knew before. Oh, that's what's here.
Mhm.
Oh,
Mhm.
it's thrilling. It's so thrilling, and this is why, I think about the advice people give writers is to write what you know, and I just think it's the absolute worst advice I've ever heard. No, no, write past what you know, write way past, right to that edge, and then go over it, and let the world, let the process, and even let the form of what you're writing, and in my case, poetry, teach you something new.
Mhm.
For instance, when I'm writing, often there's like this kind of first rush of language, and then, now what? And this is when I feel like trusting the form itself, and I don't mean like a sonnet, I just mean trusting the things that I know about what happens in a poem that make it move me.
Mm,
This is when they come into play. So I've written the first flush, I'm like, here it is. And then I'm like, okay, well, what else? And so often what's happened is that I've put down one idea, but there's no tension in the poem yet. And that's so important. You know, I don't, we
mm,
could argue, and you and I could maybe find a poem that we both love, that everyone loves, that has no tension. And we'd say, oh, look, see, there's the, but I'm going to say that's the exception, that all poems want tension. Why? Because real life is full of tension. And all the poem wants to do is to reflect what it is to be alive. It wants to not answer it, but dance with that question.
mhm,
So knowing that allows me to come to a page with, oh, well, here's what I thought I knew. Here's what came out easily. And now, can I find the part that argues with it? Can I find the part that twists it or turns it or opens it up or expands it? And in this way, I feel like trusting poetry as a medium and knowing enough about poetry as a medium allows that knowing beyond my knowing to come through.
mhm, mhm. I love the way you're describing this. I just was reminded of this ancient Celtic myth. It's beautifully explored, written and explored in Simon Ugler's book about psychedelics and the soul. And I'm not going to do the myth justice, but I feel like bringing it in because it's so beautiful and vivid and connects to an idea that's stemming from what you're sharing for me. The woman in the myth goes to this well, and the well, as in many myths, especially in that area, the well is the connection to the underworld. It's a connection to, or the other world, I think is how they might describe it, that it connects to the mystery, to the womb, to the shapeless, formless, generative, gestative darkness that sustains this upper world, so to say, or this regular world that we live in our human bodies. And so she goes to the well, and something happens where she's taken by it, and it's magnificent because she drowns in the well, and she actually transforms into this like what do you call it when you're like part human, part animal, anamorph, like an anamorphic figure. And it's really incredible, right? But she's lost now. She's in the other world. And so the myth is kind of speaking to many things, but the thing that was stirred for me is that there's an importance of maintaining a foot in this world, one foot in this world and one foot in the other world, and that it's the tension that allows us to um, really be ensouled and enlivened by the bewildering beauty and creative force that is life, that is sustained by that otherworldly darkness. So it seems like there's this to because I feel like poetry is also like you're apprenticing with the mystery. But to be a good apprentice, it seems like there needs to be a foot, grounded here and now. Do you get what I'm
I
saying?
totally get it. I totally get it. And I love this myth, and I love it, because it speaks so closely to something I've never heard of before. But it, I think it's why, and this is another thing, I think the advice is show, don't tell, which I think is just garbage. I think it's show and tell, which I think is one foot in this world, show the sensory world, right? What is it to be a human? What is it to be in a body? How are we tethered to life here? The taste of strawberries and the smell of skunk and the sound of that Schumann quintet and the sight of bombs going off. Like, we are tethered to all of this through
Mhm,
our bodies.
mhm,
Then we have this glorious, realm of the mind and imagination and what we long for and what we hope for and what we dream of and all of that abstractness, that mysteriousness. And I think the poem can do both, right? It can do that show and the tell.
Mm,
The telling being that mysterious inner world, and how important it is for us to do both. How important embodiment is in a poem
mm,
to tether us to this life and all the riches of that life, and to let them meet. Right? And by that life I mean the life of the spirit, the life, the all that mysterious unknown curiosity, wonder, all of it.
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, beautiful. So I wonder if this is a good time to read Wilding.
Okay, let's see. I think I could find it right away. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I was just here in this. I was just here just this week, the
okay,
place that this
okay. I
poem is about.
I love all the resonant threads and synchronicities in this. It's really, really beautiful and special. So yeah, please read that for us.
Um, and I wrote it actually for my friend Corinne, who was with this is our special place that we go, Wilding. It is always near freezing, this high alpine lake where we slide into oddly blue water. And bare, strangled sounds tear from our throats as if our own wildness is shredding through manicured versions of self. I crave it, this scraping away of everything that isn't limb thrash and lung gasp and skin scream and heart bang and wild, uncontrollable breathing. Crave the tingling after, the feral laughter, the way the world slips more deeply into us when we dare to slip more deeply into the world.
Mhm.
That's exactly what we were just talking about. Well done, Tay. Well done finding the poem to point to it. I mean, and there it is. It is that same, just so embodied, and yet this also just all of that life that we couldn't possibly understand so much more than, in the way that we can feel in those moments, so fully resonant, so alive.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah. Yeah, so this is making me think about, like, is that the word I wanna use? Yeah, responsibility and art and poetry. Um, or maybe not responsibility, I think that's connected to it, but more like responsivity.
Oh yeah.
Responsivity. Because I want to bring back in kind of how we started, how I was thinking about just how much suffering is happening right now, and um, how art as this as inherently having this capacity, this revolutionary capacity, not to hold it up on a pedestal, but just to speak honestly to it. Art, I see it as having this revolutionary capacity, and I think that's because of its responsivity, responding, as we've been talking about, to what's actually present now, and dancing with it in a way that generates something meaningful and moving. And
Mhm.
so I'd love to hear about you and just hear you speak to that, and how you're thinking about that now.
Yeah. Well, I think this is one of the blessings of writing a poem every day. Okay, is that for me anyway, to write a poem every day, it means that I'm necessarily writing out of whatever is happening, right? What's here right now. So that could be what's happening in my own backyard. That could be what I see happening on the news, or both, in which they marry, they come together uh, and constellate in the poem. And I love that word, responsivity. That is what the poem is asking of us, is to respond to what's here. Take it in and wonder about it. Not to know, however. I feel like that
Mhm.
boy, I really resist that, words that I feel like I myself resist would be words such as wisdom or knowing, or I
Mm,
find that myself, I'm more drawn to poems, even maybe to all art, that isn't so certain.
mhm,
And a lot of the art that feels certain to me, the poems that tell us this is how you should live,
mm,
I resist them.
mhm.
Uh, I much more likely to fall in love with a poem that stays with the wondering, stays in the mystery, stays in the curiosity.
Yeah.
And because I don't think I believe any of the answers that we could come up with for any, or maybe I could believe them for a moment and then not past that. So to me, often the truest thing would be to ask a question. Often, I certainly have plenty of poems that are just questions.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
Maybe I could share a poem that I wrote a week or so ago that I think is was curious about something I was experiencing in that moment and how it related to how I felt all of a sudden about the rest of the world. And
Yeah.
it's me, I suppose, responding to the what was at hand and also what felt much bigger.
Mhm, mhm.
So it's called The Night I Fell in Love with the Whole World. It was the boy at baggage claim who started it. His elation. Each time a new bag would drop, he would point at the suitcase and squeal, then turn to his grandmother with incandescent delight. His grandmother deepened my joy. How she beamed at her grandson, praised him in Spanish. Her words, a bright blur, I interpreted more through hunch than through certainty. And sooner than you'd think, I fell in love with every single person at baggage claim 16. Didn't need to know their stories to know they were worthy of love. Every one a grandchild, every one a light. It was like how on these midsummer nights the late sun shines through the cities and fields, and everything is beautiful. O people of Iran, Israel, Palestine, Ukraine, Russia, Somalia, Yemen, Maine, I will never know you. Yet I honor how you carry inside you your own strange and beautiful spark, how each of you, too, is a grandchild. Each of you, too, longs to belong. No matter what our leaders do, the light is right to see how much you, too, long to be safe, to be seen, to be kind, to be loved, to be trusted, to be home.
Mhm, mhm.
I suppose in terms of responsivity, Tay, just there it was, this like sweet devotion I had all of a sudden for this little boy, and how the grandmother, just her delight in him, how it just opened it up. And there was this, I mean, I just felt so much love for every single,
Mm,
so beautiful, so powerful, so potent, just this trust that I had that every single person deserves love. It does not mean I agree with everything everyone does. My
mm.
goodness. There's a lot of people who make really difficult choices for everyone.
Yeah,
And we all have our own ideas about how it should be. But I really deeply believe that everyone believes, that everyone deserves to belong, deserves love.
yeah, yeah. Because it's the missing of that belonging, the longing for belonging, and the shadow that comes from the shame that's piled on top of that, and
Yeah.
the um, the suppression that pushes it down and further into into the dark corners that lead to the kind of behaviors that we might deem as unlovable or unredeemable. Um, so, of course, then the antidote is that. um, to learn to love even that which, and it's easy to say. I'm just noticing right now. I'm saying
Easy to
it
say.
and it's up here, but when I
It's
feel
so easy right here.
and I feel into my body and I can just feel like,
Right?
oh, so difficult to cross that threshold. But
Oh, yeah.
I think maybe the desire to fully cross over gets in the way of us just being in the journey of just even orienting toward that kind of threshold.
Yeah. Or even being able to dream it. I
Yeah.
think of this all the time is if how do we live into the life we most long for?
Hmm.
How do we the the brain itself um, creates frames. And so when we are living against things, right? Poets against war, that's my favorite example. I always go to that one. But, I'm against this person or I don't like this. But each time we reiterate that, we make it the main frame, right? It stays the subject. That's what's being seeded again and again and again. So how do we write much, much harder? How do we write what we're for? The world we most want to live in, the world that's possible. Can
Hmm.
we dream that? And can we write into that? And can we live into that? How
Hmm.
do we do that? That I'm very interested in that and how writing is a part of that evolution.
Hmm. Yeah. So there's the widening of the lens, but I'm also hearing that there's the clarifying of the lens, or like the polishing, the cleaning, tending to, I guess, purification, not in like a, like, you know, monotheistic religious sense, but just like purifying perception, purifying perception in order to see as clearly as possible, not attached to seeing things clearly and that being an end point, right?
Right.
Now I see clear, but this ongoing kind of cleansing.
And invitation, I think.
Yeah.
An invitation and not an arrival. I can't agree with you more about that. Not like a place we arrive and then we live there forever.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be easier? Or not, I don't know. But actually,
Well, I think about all the times where, I've arrived somewhere and there's like moments of peace, right? Especially if it's a great arrival. And then it's not too long after that the movement of my organic organism just wants to move into the next scenario, whether that's wondrous or painful.
yeah, because we don't get to stay. We don't get to stay.
There. Yeah.
That isn't how life works.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's for me, like I laugh about it, Tay, just because I feel like I learn the same things again and again and
Mm,
again.
mm,
Oh, like I just get to I think the thing now though that's a little different for me is that when I move through these spaces of seeing and I'm like, oh, there it is again. There's almost a delight or just a sweetness in it.
mm,
And even as like a self-compassion in it, like, oh, oh, sweetheart, you really thought that you'd already moved through. You thought that,
mm.
but instead of I can hear my old self was much more harsh and critical, like,
Yeah.
"Oh, you idiot, you already learned this,
Yeah.
so that evolution is apparent to me that there's a kindness and even a levity or a graciousness now that's possible around revisiting the same thing again and again and again. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that because yeah, that kind of evolution of awareness, that that it's facilitated by a deepening of acceptance. And the
That's
acceptance isn't like you just allow anything to happen that's happening, but you accept what's happening as it is, and then you respond as it is, rather than putting that strange buffer in between, which you spoke to before, which is like the known, you know, what I know, what I've
Yeah.
experienced in the past, and basically living off memory to distort the present. That this deepening into acceptance allows us to not ignore the past, but to be just rightly rooted with the past beneath us
Yeah.
and meeting the season as it's happening now.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Just understanding how not alive that is,
Mm,
whatever
mhm,
it was we learned, right?
mm,
It was alive in that moment,
mhm,
but now we're in this new moment. So I love how you say this, rightly rooted.
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm,
Growing out of it
mhm.
again, always, always, always growing out of it.
Yeah. And so the fruits of that, to stay with that metaphor of the tree, one of the fruits that I think so many of us want deep down, is peace within ourselves, but also in the world, right? As they're not separate. And you wrote a potent poem about that called Toward Peace. And I wonder if you'd read that for us.
Perhaps some part of me still believes peace is a destination, a place we arrive, ideally together. I notice how shiny it is, this belief, like a flower made of crystal, beautiful but lifeless, devoid of the dust and scuff that come from living a real day. Meanwhile, there is this invitation to grow into peace, the way real flowers grow from dirt into air, with blight and drought, beetles and hail. Meanwhile, this invitation to live in the tangle of fear and failure, to be humbled by my own inner wars, and wonder how to find a living peace right here. The peace that arrives when we take just one step through the mess toward compassion and notice as our foot rises, our heart also rises. And in that lifted moment, still scraping along in the dirt, there is a peace so real. We become light, become the momentum that is the change.
Mm, mhm,
Right. That I think that's it. That it's the momentum that is the change, right? It isn't the moment, it's that trajectory, it's that momentum, that it's how we're moving forward, which is why I feel like writing into what's possible, right? That moment at baggage claim 16 when I fell so deeply in love with the world and realized how simple it was. Right? In that moment, it was so simple. I know it's not simple. I know it's not simple, but in that moment, it was.
mhm,
So, okay, pin that and say, okay, there's one step on the path. And now that's part of that trajectory.
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
how is this momentum moving? How do we move through that moment? And how do we allow that to be part of this path toward, well, in this case, peace?
mhm. Yeah, I love that connection to simplicity, because of course, and this is, I think, an important distinction that simplicity doesn't mean it's not complex.
Right.
You know, I actually think that simplicity and complexity are sisters, that they're deeply entwined. At least that's what I notice when I look out from my humble little, perch, and I look out at the cosmos, because it seems like the complexity of life and creation is made up of simple moments, as far as I can tell. Um, and so I just love that call to simplicity, not as not as a turning away from what seems to be very complicated, when we look out at what's happening in the human world on this great earth of ours.
Mhm.
Um, but I guess, as a beckoning to just be more present with what's here now, and to honor that what's here now is all you really need
Yeah,
to awaken um, those parts of you that are inherently peaceful, which is also what I heard in the poem,
yeah,
that peace is here now. Um, yeah.
right. And I think there's this way that we don't like the paradox is what it's all about, right? So
That's
yes, the
right.
simplicity and the complexity are there are two sides to the same coin, right? There we will never have one without the other, and they're always wedded, always.
Hmm.
And just like any opposition, and this is part of my thrill in poetry too, Tay, is that anytime I can say anything true, if I can write a line that feels true, then I invite myself to write the exact opposite on the next line and wonder, is it equally true?
Mm,
Almost always. Almost always. Poems love paradox, and I do feel like this is part of what allows for us to expand, to become more spacious, is this way that we say, oh, okay, well, this is totally true. Oh, its opposite is totally true. Oh,
mm, mm,
now we're open to this much fuller perspective, this
mhm,
much wider lens on reality because of our opened up perspective about what is true.
mhm.
And I love poetry for this reason. My old mentor, Jack Mueller, used to growl all the time, power to the paradox.
Yeah,
And I hear him.
I love that.
And at the time, I didn't really get it. Now, well, who knows how much more I'll come to get it too, but now I believe it utterly, utterly. I feel like my life is just a nonstop, you know, proof for how paradox works.
Mm, yeah,
Just
yeah. Well, it's like the spiral of life is propelled by paradox.
yeah,
So it makes sense that we would continuously spiral back into that understanding at deeper layers. And
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
How
I
it
totally
changes
agree.
again and again and again. How it just oh, and just it's this and in this way, I think it keeps me from becoming too certain
Yeah,
of
yeah,
what is right. Uh,
yeah.
it really helps me, especially when I'm longing to other someone.
Mhm,
That really helps me. Oh, okay, sweetheart, look, really, like what just taking any statement, I think, they're wrong. Okay, how could I turn that around? I'm wrong. Oh,
mhm.
they're right. I'm right. Like there's just so many ways to see it and to see how all of them could be true.
Yeah,
The way that it relaxes the body, right? You're just like, oh, it just takes us off that pedestal of righteousness, which does nobody any good.
mhm,
Uh,
mhm.
and
Yeah,
it opens us up to meet each other and to meet ourselves, I suppose, too.
yeah. Yeah, I'm reminded of, are you aware of Stephen Jenkinson?
Mm-mm.
No? I think you'd really like Stephen Jenkinson. So, you know, maybe I'll send you a title of his book after this. I'll try to remember that. He's written many. Anyway, he talks about truth in, I think, his most recent book, Come of Age, which is the case for eldership in a time of trouble. It's the subtitle. And he talks about truth as truing. He invites this other sense, and he relates it to, at least this is how I think of it now. I don't know if he talked about it in this exact way, but I think of, have you heard those beautiful hand pan drums?
Oh, yeah.
Right? They're so beautiful, and they're using the tension of the steel to make their sounds, and it's all resonant, and so to make those notes, um, the makers of these drums are tapping the drum probably, I mean, I don't know exactly, but hundreds, probably thousands of times of little taps to kind of get the steel into its perfect kind of position to resonate in the way that it eventually will. And that this is truing. This is the act of truing. And it is the honoring of that paradox and that balancing of like, okay, we hit it over here and it caused this kind of sound to occur. And that sound isn't in full resonance. And so we're going to hit over here to balance that out. And you do that enough and you find that kind of still point in the center. Um, and so I'm reminded of that. And I'm just curious to open up here at the end as an inquiry. Like, what is truth? How do you know when something's true? Because I think
Right.
that that's also a dangerous thing too, right? It's like playing with, I don't know, alchemical
Yeah.
transformational fire, right? Like when someone says, for example, a way that this could go awry is, well, this is my truth. You know, I I I took this I took this action. I behaved in this way that hurt you or this community because this felt like my truth. This
Yeah.
was true for me. And so I'm just so curious to hear you reflect on that.
Well, first, I love the idea of truing, right? To verbify this word, right? Which is a little bit, I think, of what we were talking about before, which is instead of arriving at the true place, to continually wonder, is this true? Is this true? Is this true? Is this true?
Mhm,
Tap, 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 is this it? Tap, 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 is this it?
mhm,
And, I think that, um, I mean, that's what a poem is wanting to do all the time, right? If that's the whole art of writing a poem for me. Other
mhm.
people might have very different answers about what a poem is doing. But
Right.
for me, it is this act of wondering again and again and again. And most excitingly to me, Day, in recent years, is letting the body be a part of that. I'm kind of stunned by how many years, decades, I wrote just just I don't know, I didn't even know I had a body when I
Mm,
was writing.
mm.
Now, how essential the body is as a tool
Yeah,
for knowing authenticity, for knowing, "Oh, now I'm touching it."
yeah,
Um, so maybe I'll close with this poem that starts the book. It's actually the first poem in
yeah,
the
sure.
Unfolding,
I just wanna
and
say one thing on that
oh, yeah.
the body piece. I interviewed Azra Bertrand, and he talks he's goes very deep into ecosomatics and this kind of work with folks. He's a doctor too, but he talks about the body as being oracular. That he says the body is inherently oracular, and that by not recognizing the oracular powers that are carried in each cell, each atom of each cell in our body, we're really shutting ourselves off to, at the very, at least, the mystery of
Yeah,
that's held within our bones, but also probably the magic
yeah.
that is there too. And so I love that although you spent decades mostly up in the head, that there's been this sinking down into the bones in a deep way. I love to hear that.
Yeah. Oh, and it's exciting to live it.
Yeah, yeah,
And to continue to, like, it just to continue to follow it. It's ever enlivening.
yeah.
Um, so the poem has an epigraph from my teacher, Joy Sharp. She says, "I am what continues." There it is too, true ing, right? Um, and the poem is called Self-Portrait as Tuning Fork.
Mm,
There is, perhaps you have felt it, a moment when the day falls away and your name falls away and everything you thought you knew falls away. And for a moment, you know yourself only as whatever it is that continues. Your whole body abuzz with the eternity of it. and you quiver as if struck by the great hand of what is true, becoming pure tone, a vibration, a wave, a human-shaped resonator tuned to the frequency of life itself. And the later you might try to dissect what happened, in that moment, you're too abloom to wonder how or why. You simply are this ecstatic unfolding, knowing the self as I am so alive and so infinite, you tremble like a song. Yeah. The ecstatic unfolding. That's what we are, right? That's what we are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We try and write about it, talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Poetry is forever frustrating, Tay, because it's always going to be words and not life itself. But
Mm.
the joy of the pointing, the
Uh,
joy of the dancing, the joy of the wondering,
yeah.
you know, oh, is this it? Is this it? Is this it? I think that's why I have to write a poem every single day, because not one poem is going to touch it all, right? So you just keep trying, just doing it, just trying, doing,
Yeah.
exploring, opening.
Yeah. And the frustration really is a prerequisite for revelation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
While we're doing,
yeah, and I love that image of just staying steadfast in the trembling, as you mentioned at the end there. And yeah, this conversation has been really like a healing balm for my heart, as I suspected it would be. That's how your poetry is for me personally. And so I'm just so grateful to have the opportunity to meet with you again and sit down and weave these incredible poems and your words and insights in this conversation today. Thank you, Rosemary.
thank you. Thank you, Tay.
You may not know that Rosemary was the second guest of this humble homegrown project. And so if you enjoyed this conversation, I invite you to go back into the archives to episode number 2. I think it's called Of Ink and Earth. And tune in to our conversation that we shared, must have been a couple of years ago. And it was a bit disjointed because I was in Nicaragua at the time, living on a little island called Ometepe, and the internet would go out multiple times a day. And unfortunately, it did go out multiple times throughout our conversation. And she was so graceful and forgiving to stick around and keep trying. And so we were able to patch together a conversation that, despite the patchiness, still ended up being very beautiful and meaningful. And so, if you're curious, go check it out. And thank you for being here today and listening to the whole episode. I really appreciate your presence. I'm so grateful that you would choose to invite us into your day in this way. And just know that we are very much blessed by it. And so I hope you have a grounded and meaningful and loving day ahead of you. Take care. Bless your heart and your way.